Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I am so pleased to bring to you today someone I've gotten to know very well over the past year, and my admiration and love for this woman runs deep. You'll see why in our conversation today. I'd like to welcome Cordelia Gaffar. Hello, Cordelia.
Hello, Meredith. It's great to be with you today.
I'm so glad that you are with me. And just so my audience knows, Cordelia and I have gotten to know each other because she leads the team of hosts for another podcast called The Ultimate Coach. And I'm one of those hosts, and she's absolutely a joy to work with. And speaking of joy, Cordelia is the ultimate joy goddess. And that means she holds space for others to reveal their joy within. And she also created another phrase called joy mongering. And she created that from several life experiences and also based on her philosophy that self-nurturing is freedom, something so many of us have neglected at times. She brings this joy into her work as an executive transformation coach. She's won multiple awards for her 8 books and her own 2 podcasts, along with other awards like the Brainz Global 500 Award of Influencers and Entrepreneurs in 2021. She has wisdom and life experiences that I am so excited to bring to you today. So Cordelia, let's start with briefly telling us what kinds of events have led up to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Let me give that some thought. First of all, I left corporate America about 19 years ago as a CFO for a small IT company in Washington, D.C. And that was a choice, right? Because I had 2 miscarriages in between my first 2 children, and I had just found out I was expecting a third. And so my choices were related to my health and related to the rearing of my children. Then my second career was, again, choosing to homeschool my children over a period of 18 years. And really pouring myself into that process, including creating curriculums, understanding learning styles, facilitating co-ops and organizing co-ops and, Boy Scout troops, Girl Scout troops, travel soccer. Yeah. So I've been leading a lot. And in all those things, right? In all those ways, beginning with while I was still in corporate America, I realized that if I don't nurture myself, I won't be able to pour into anything or anyone, anything I do or anyone I work with or love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about some of those self-nurturing practices because I guarantee you many of my listeners are neglecting at least one or more of them. And
probably all.
It could be all, yes, because, and this is also for me because I tend to, be someone that focuses on getting things done and sometimes put those self-nurturing practices on the back burner. But before we go there, I want you to share a little bit about how you have discovered this element of joy and why that is such an important aspect of your own way of being, and also what you help elicit from the clients that you work with.
Yeah, joy is available always. It's again a choice. So when things happen that I don't like, I choose to think, why don't I like it? What don't I like about it? And how can this be an opportunity for me? Right? And just the shift and the thought process, thinking
Mhm.
about all the possibilities and opportunity there, that brings me joy. It's really that simple. Does that make sense?
It does. And, I love that you are keeping it simple, because sometimes we think about joy as something to pursue, sort of like happiness, a
Mm,
place to get to, as opposed to a place to come from.
mm.
And I would love for you to talk about that distinction, because you bubble up with joy. I love how easily, you laugh and you enjoy whatever presents itself in the moment. And so for those of us that tend to be more serious, and that's not our automatic response, what would be some suggestions to help us develop that lightness?
Mm. Pause for the cause of you. That's step number one. Number two, breathe into your body and be there. Like I'll give you an example of what that breath sounds like. It's just really simple. Like sometimes we stop breathing,
Mm-hmm.
right? When something that we don't like is happening. So I'm just like, well, isn't this a great opportunity? And step three is, if you're physically capable to, cartwheels.
Cartwheels. Oh, that's a new one.
But if not, my point with that is just something physical, right? You want to stir that energy in your body as well, because the immediate thing that happens when something stressful is going on is you stop breathing, you freeze, and you sit still. These are the poisons that keep us trapped and stuck and unable to think. So it's just shifting energy.
Mm-hmm. Go back to the first one that you mentioned, because you said it rather quickly.
Pause for the cause of you.
I love that. Pause for the cause of you. What do you mean by that?
Just stop. I mean, just stop thinking, stop uh, feeling the need to keep doing, right? Just be.
Mm-hmm. And, I think this might be just personal on my part, but I think sometimes there might be a fear of stopping because of falling behind, or what am I going to see if I pause to look? How do you help some of your clients move to that place of pausing and being actually comfortable with that pause, to take time for themselves, because they're not used to putting themselves to treating themselves with that kind of nurturing and respect?
Mhm. Yeah. I'm laughing because I just think of, like, so often it's just like, but I've got to do something. So what I say is, if you were your mother, what would you do for yourself in this moment? How would you nurture yourself? Um, what is the most loving thing you can say to yourself? What is the most and if that's hard, an easier thing is, like, people can more often do this because they like to do, right? What's your favorite love song? Go and listen to it. And when you listen to it, instead of hearing it as one lover singing to the other, hear it as you singing to yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a great suggestion, because there are so many good love songs out there. And to imagine, because so often I think we don't speak kindly to ourselves. And so that probably is a stretch for some folks to really be able to listen to a song as though it's to them, because we can be so critical of ourselves. And I think that's part of pausing and slowing down and paying attention to the positives.
Yeah. You have to slow down to speed up. You do.
Mhm. That makes so much sense. Well, let's talk a little bit about these 5 self-nurturing practices that you help people take on, because I know each one of them is very important. What's the very first one?
Sleep. Again, another thing that we don't do. And in my book, Detached Love, Transforming Your Heart so that you can transform your mind, I take you through a process of creating a calm down routine for sleep. And it actually begins with the start of your day. How do you feed your body, right? That's going to determine your energy levels and whether you are completely depleted by the end of the day to the point of exhaustion. And that's the thing. When people are so exhausted, sometimes they cannot sleep. It doesn't logically make sense, but physically it does. So just being very particular. Anyway, you can read the book and just go through that whole process for yourself. But sleep is the number one self-nurturing practice because it's the best way to detox, available to you every night between the hours of midnight to 5 a.m. That's what's happening. As long as you go to bed 90 minutes before midnight. And it's also the number one metabolic stabilizer. So people that suffer with weight issues, they have emotional eating issues, or they have mental health issues, it's because they're not sleeping well.
Talk about that magic that happens between midnight and 5 a.m.
Yeah, as long as you've had one 90-minute REM cycle of sleep, then your body automatically activates these magical chemicals to realign your system and, get out all the gases, all the liquid toxins and solid toxins, right? So in a perfect world, if you have a really good night's sleep, you'll wake up in the morning and, everything you will come out, right? And including your, I'm not sure how to say this, but like your breath will take on a different odor, right? So, I mean, you can have morning breath, but that's a form of gas, right? And during the time you sleep, you'll expel gas, right? But once you wake up in the morning, you should not be expelling gas unless when you stretch your body, you'll hear the snap, crackle, pop, right? That's gases releasing also, because they're held in your body all day long, especially in our sedentary society where we sit all the time, right? And we don't move enough. And so, but within your digestive tract, you should not have gases. It should have created a complete solid form, and everything should come out in the morning. So, and after that, you should be really hungry, right? So then you're going to, that's not the number 2 self-nurturing tip though. The number 2 is like, once you've slept well, then you'll think well, right? So when I said you get out of bed and you start stretching, right? How often do we automatically go into a to-do list? And may I offer to you what I call an allow list? What will I allow myself to do today? Right? And so it shifts the thinking, because now all that stuff that would have been on your to-do list would never be on an allow list, who wants to do that, right? So, and what ends up happening is that allow list probably just has one fun thing on it, right? So I'm gonna allow myself to have fun today. I'm going to allow myself to be in joy, right? Or to default to joy, right? So these are that's the number 2 self-nurturing practice, is to choose your thoughts wisely, to maintain a certain energy. Number 3 is food, right? So now we slept well, we think well. What energy does my body need today? Just like you don't drive a BMW and put regular gas, you put premium gas in there, right? So if you have like a marathon day where you have to go from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., that happens sometimes. You make sure that you have high quality foods to start your day, and start with a really good breakfast. And I don't really like to offer what those foods are because I understand that there are many different body types, so one of the things that I've studied over the years and practiced myself is food as medicine, which is an ancient practice called Unani Tib. And so that is in the Islamic tradition of medicine. So and it's similar to Ayurveda in that there are 4 body types instead of 3 body types. There's 3 doshas in Ayurveda. And so and for depending on your body type, there's certain types of foods, certain types of rest, movement, and all those things. So I really don't like to suggest what to eat. But I do offer, I think it's still live on my website, an assessment where you can figure out what your body type is. And then that lets you, that narrows it down, like the categories. So, so yeah, food. And so number 4 is movement, right? Now, in my own personal practice, and what I suggest with my clients is to have some form of movement before eating breakfast. In general, I suggest that you always do movement or exercise before eating, because it gives you more energy. And if you want to lose weight, that's the way to do it. And so movement, I just generically say movement because there's such a wide variety of movement. And over the course of my life, I've chosen all of them. So, like martial arts, qigong, yoga, eccentrics, dance. What else? I think I said qigong already, right? No, I didn't. Oh, I did. And then walking, hiking, mountain climbing, rock climbing, swimming. There's so many different forms of movement. The ones that are more accessible in your house are going to be, like free weights. I do weightlifting as well, so but again, it depends on the energy you need for your day. So for one of those really long days, you're going to need an exercise that allows you to keep burning fat, right? So in this case, weightlifting is really good for that because it sets your metabolism up to constantly feed off of your excess energy stores, which is fat. Right? So and so finally we have your emotions. And so this is such a very important self-nurturing practice, to acknowledge that you have emotions. I know your listeners probably read a lot of Brené Brown. And so her most recent book is Atlas of Emotions, right? Or a Geography of Emotions. I can't remember. I think it's Atlas of Emotions. She identifies about 88 emotions. How about that? Now, we live in a world where it's not professional to express emotion. And may I offer to you that there's no way that you can exist without acknowledging you have emotions. And experiencing those. Because going back to what we were saying earlier about speaking kindly to yourself, if you can't acknowledge that you feel, then how could you acknowledge anybody else has feelings? What kind of leader are you going to show up as if your self-leadership is suffering in that area? So emotions, and here's the thing about emotions, I like to read all the female scientists, and so there's my favorite one is Dr. Candace Pert, and she has a book called Molecules of Emotions. And here's the fun part. They only last, it's a chemical reaction in the brain that happens, it only takes about 60 to 90 seconds. And so the other 5 minutes, hours, days that transpire beyond that is you choosing to ruminate. Yeah.
Boy, that's a powerful number. Yeah, I want to stay with the emotions piece here a bit, because thinking of both men and women, we get different messages growing up. Men are told us, boys, don't be a baby, boys, don't cry, don't feel. So they get these messages of repressing the emotions, and women get different kinds of messages. Either way, we're not really trained on how to appropriately express them. And so they can come out as some of those ones like anger, when there's so many other things. 88, that's a lot, that we have no awareness of, right? We react in the moment. And what you were saying about how long the chemical emotion actually lasts versus how long we ruminate, dwell on it, continue replaying over and over again. What are some ways that people can become more aware of their emotions, number one? And then number two, once they are aware, how to handle them appropriately so it isn't damaging to themselves or the other person?
Here's the great news. It's super easy, right? Emotions are data, right? Just like any other information you get. The only difference is it's a feeling, right? So, and going back to, again, pause for the cause of you. And instead of letting it destabilize you, just pause. I'm having an emotion. If it helps, set your timer for 90 seconds. At the end of 90 seconds, again, in that pause, what did I just learn from that feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Why did that feeling happen? Is another question to ask yourself. So let's talk about anger. I love to talk about anger because people run like, anger? Oh no, I don't get angry. Right? They're running out. Oh yes, you do. So the great thing about anger, for example, is it lets us know that our values have been rubbed up against. There's something that we stand for. There's something that means so much to us that is not being valued, seen, or heard. You got to pay attention to that. So this is why these questions are super important. This is why the pause is important, right? And so with anger, there's another step though. You're not going to be able to ask yourself those questions, right? So you're going to have to move to shift your energy, right? If you're sitting down and you're angry, stand up. And this is where movement is awesome. You can, simply shift your body, moving your shoulders. Moving the shoulders, and I talk about this in my last book too, is super important because this is where we hold other people's energy, right? So if you feel like you've been attacked, you want to move your shoulders and get that off, right? If you feel like your security is being affected, right? You think you're going to lose your job or your position, you want to move your hips because that's the energy center for that. If you are, and then anger in general lives in the stomach, in the area of the stomach. So while you're moving your shoulders, twist from side to side. Yeah. So it's like a little bit of a workout. And then your brain comes back online. And then those questions I gave you, you can ask yourself that.
That's so good. Let's look a little bit deeper at anger. I like your definition of it in terms of it rubbing up against values. I've seen people also, though, get angry when they take personally something that someone has said or done. And it could be related to their values, but sometimes it's related to what they think should have been done. It may or may not be specific to values, if that makes sense. So, in terms of learning how to express, first of all, identify, I think that was helpful, what you've just said. And then looking at responding in a way that really fosters the relationship and doesn't do damage. I think pausing is so important. And then what to say after feeling that. How honest can we be with each other, I guess, is a question.
Well, so it's very important to wait 24 to 48 hours. If I'm super angry, 72 hours, you know, let's just be honest. You don't want to just go after somebody. What it looks like in the moment is, you know, I'm going to have to get back to you. And I'm going to give this some deep consideration. And, you know, that should be your go-to when you have to interact with somebody, right? Because you do have to give it deep consideration. And to your point about sometimes it's not your values being rubbed against, it could be a trigger. I don't really like to use that word because, you know, in my definition, just to be clear, it's not going to be the clinical definition of trigger, but it's basically evidence-based experiences repeating themselves. So if you are in a situation where, you know, this happened to me recently, right? I had a corporate wound show up in a non-corporate space. And so I had evidence-based experience triggering me in that situation. And I was very angry. And I think we talked a little bit about this, but we won't go into it here. So, and it took me a good 72 hours to get some clarity on that. And the process that I went through was I slept, I got a massage, I danced, I hiked, and I changed my diet, all the things that I suggest to my clients. So, you know, it is a real thing. When you're dealing with triggers, diet is super important. Movement in nature is very important because it's just the easiest way to ground your energy and to reconnect with yourself. It really is. Yeah.
That's so important. I know for me, my husband and I are avid bird watchers, and we love getting out with nature. And I can just feel my body relaxing when we are out there and I'm just paying attention to what's going on. No matter how many birds might be around or not, just being out there in the elements where it is amazing, the relaxing that can happen when I really get present with what I'm seeing around me. And I think that's really important advice. Thinking about in a workplace setting, Cordelia, and where people maybe have been, because I know you work with a lot of female executives, women, anyone who's been marginalized in any way is going to come up against situations where they might feel anger, they might feel the disappointment. And going back to what you said about triggers, previous experiences can cause them to relive those in a flash, even unconsciously. So what can we do in the moment? Because in a workplace, we can't always say, give me 72 hours or whatever. What are some ways that we can pause, you mentioned, but if we're, say, in a meeting where someone has said something that just triggered us and we feel that we want to respond, what are some appropriate thoughts and words that we might use to help us in a moment like that?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, the practice that I have my clients in, though, is to be in alignment, right? Because proportionately, we're more body than brain. And so when you're in the practice of being in your body, you'll feel that vibration differently for the trigger, right? So what I'm about to say to you could make sense to some people and it may not make sense to other people. So I just wanted to preface that. So this is where you verbalize. Can we pause with that for a minute? What did you just say? Now, what stops a lot of my clients from saying that in the moment before they work with me is they're worried that they're going to be perceived as an emotional or angry woman, right? But the word pause implies that you're not being emotional, but that there's something significant that's on the table that's being overlooked.
Mm.
So there's nothing wrong with saying that, you know? So I mean, it works. It works quite effectively because the person that's going to be like, oh, we don't need to pause, we've got, then that makes everybody else in the room look at the person that doesn't want to pause differently. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the person who poses that question, can we pause? I love that question. I think the immediate response of the people there is applauding silently the person bringing it up. For those who noticed it as well, that it's this whole thing of addressing the elephant in the room, right? Instead of pretending it isn't there or erupting with anger or outrage, this idea of how can we set the stage where we can have communication here. And I think that's asking questions is such a valuable way to get at that. So thank you. That's very powerful. You mentioned the word alignment. Talk about this whole four-mind alignment that you've created.
Yeah. So let's just imagine you're born as a child, right? And so the first 2 years of our life, I'm going to say 3 years, and I'll let you know what that means in a minute. We feel and we have lots of inputs, but we don't really know how to speak yet, right? And so by the time we're speaking and walking, we're about 3 years old, 2.5, 3 years old, pretty steadily. And then we're being told what we can't do, right? Again, we still don't speak very well, but most of what we repeat is no, yes, and, maybe give me or wah, right? So in the four-mind alignment, going back to being in your body, and now that we're adults and we're able to verbalize, right? And have the conversation of consent, right? Whether I want to talk about topics, whether I want to be touched in a certain way. There's a lot of assumptions, now that COVID's over, right? Where people just, slap you on your shoulder. Maybe you don't want to be slapped on your shoulder, and that's a consent issue, which is constantly overlooked. And so in the four-mind alignment, I talk about the four minds being your brain, right? Where your thoughts are, your heart, where your emotions are, your stomach, where your immunity is. But, I've been talking throughout the conversation about the importance of nutrition. And then your fourth mind is your sacred space or your reproductive organs. So I've slightly mentioned that that's also the area where when we feel insecure about our position in a company or with our financial status, that energy is held there, right? And so it's very important to be at peace in your body and not make choices based on that was such a hard meeting, I'm going to just go to McDonald's, right? When you're normally like completely plant-based vegan, that's going to affect your immunity, your mentality. And so it seems like such a simple thing, but our bodies are such a high quality technology that we overlook. And that's the the manifestation of all the relationships we have, is the way we overlook simply aligning our four minds or acknowledging that we have them. Like even like my last book is transforming your heart so that you transform your mind. So I only acknowledge, the heart and the brain. And in the book, I talk more about the importance of nutrition. And even later, further in the book, I talk about the importance of consent around your sexuality. So it's the basis of the four mind alignment was there, but now I infuse that more in my sessions with clients as I see it come up, and people just, they don't recognize that it's there. So what did you hear?
This whole integration, we're all one being with these various elements that are so interconnected. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about this whole thing we've been discussing around emotions. And when we hold in those emotions, the impact they can have in other parts of our body. So I think one of the big takeaways here is paying attention to what's going on. Where do I have pain that may be signaling to me there's some unmet emotional need that I have, some repressed experiences that I haven't looked at or addressed. So to me, that's a big takeaway of what you've been talking about. We ignore any one of those four areas at our peril.
Yes.
Our health can suffer if we don't attend to each one of them and honor them in the way we treat them.
Yeah. And, the not having the confusion within is so key, because when you're willing to heal, do anything that it takes to heal your relationship with yourself, you'll show up differently as a leader.
That's such a great place to stop, because it kind of comes full circle of what we started with around the self-nurturing practices. And so the whole self-healing. And, Cordelia, that just goes back to the pause. I love that phrase that you have, pause for the cause of you. It's quite profound when you really think about what it's saying. You value yourself so much that you're willing to take the time to attend to your needs.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just love this conversation. I know we could keep going. There's so much you've brought up that I would encourage my listeners to pause and consider how this applies to them in their own way of being in their lives, at work, at home, families. I think this has so much significance for our joy, the joy we can feel and bring to ourselves and to our relationship. So, Cordelia, thank you for who you are being as the joy monger, the goddess of joy, please share how my listeners can connect with you, learn more about your work, get copies of your book, and anything else that you have coming up.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, Meredith. You can learn more about my work at my website, cordeliagaffar.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I actually have a newsletter that I publish weekly there. And also I like to have genuine conversations with people. So I want to hear your feedback about this conversation, and I invite you to email me at hello@cordeliagaffar.com.
That's great. And your podcast, besides the Ultimate Coach podcast that we both host, you have the Free to Be show, and you have some fascinating conversations with people on that show, and that's an award-winning podcast. I would encourage
Two-time award-winning.
Two-time award.
Yeah,
Yes.
I won an international award first and then a domestic award. And yeah, and actually, I have created an experience. I was toggling for the name because I really love the Free to Be, but I really love that name just for my podcast. So I have an experience that I'm offering in June called the For Your Ultimate Joy Experience. And that'll be on June 10th. Yeah.
Oh, great. So people can check out your website in the coming weeks. Well, this will be going live in April. So that's great. Thank you. And thank you again for the work that you're doing in the world to bring joy to everyone who knows you, Cordelia.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.